5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It says that we have an error. Oh, let's see, I have the bitrate too high. Yes. Okay. Says an error occurred still. Are we getting anything on the stream yet? It's still noise. Hey Max, we're doing our best to start a stream, but we haven't gotten it to work yet. So, sure. Yeah, we're just live right now. I'm adjusting the audio now. So yeah, we're just doing it. Go ahead. Cool. Yep. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move us to the live stream channel just so that we're all there and people can let me know if we have audio issues. So I'll move there and move you guys there real quick. Okay, there we go. We're in the live stream channel now. Okay, it seems like we have okay audio now, so I'll go ahead and officially start the stream. If you have audio problems, please let me know in the chat. Welcome everyone to the Red Pill Religion Weekly Podcast. I'm Andrew Stratelates. I'm joined by John Buck, writer John Buck on Twitter, my friend Dunstan, and Max Colby, the founder of Red Pill Religion. And today we're just having a bit of a live stream on prayer and the traditions of prayer in the sort of Christian context. And what we're going to do now, and it's going to be sort of our habit on these shows, is we're going to go ahead and start things with the prayer and end them with the prayer. I've just grabbed some excerpts from the Anglican Book of Common Prayer from the 1928 one of the United States. I'll go ahead and read it out loud. You guys can read on mute or along silently. So the first one is the prayer for unity. O God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, our only Savior, the Prince of Peace, give us grace seriously to lay the great dangers that we are by our unhappy divisions. Take away all hatred and prejudice and whatsoever else may hinder us from godly union and concord, that as there is but one body and one Spirit, and one hope of our calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God and Father of us all, so we may all be of one heart, of one soul, united in one holy bond of truth and peace, of faith and charity, and may be one mind and one mouth glorify Thee, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So let's go ahead and sort of introduce ourselves. You all probably know me from Twitter. I'm Andrew Stratelates. Max, do you mind saying a few words? Welcome. Dunstan? Right on. Well, we're going to have a lot of fun. Um, so I guess the first thing that I'd like to sort of open up for everyone is, what is prayer, at least to like the Christian or the ancient faithful, and what do we mean when we talk about prayer?
I think there's audio issues with the stream. None of us are coming through. I think the only person that was coming through was Andrew to begin with.
Yeah, I'm able to hear you. It's who's being broadcast on YouTube, so that's what I'm trying to fix right now. Um, so let's see here. Yeah, it's on my end.
To that which is so much beyond us. And it can be deeply rewarding. That's what I'd say.
I do think it takes a lot of humility also. Um, it takes time, or it takes humility to step back and just to reflect on who you are and your place in the world. Um, I was looking in preparation for this show of Jesus
And
and
it can
many
be deeply
many
rewarding.
instances in the Old
That's what I'd
Testament.
say.
They would go to a place of solitude, the I do mountains, or think it takes a lot of somewhere else, humility and just to pray, just to speak with God. Yeah, I think that is very, very beneficial, and I think that's all something what we all need to consider. I don't think we're really living a Christian life if we're not in prayer, in meditation, in a quiet place, and take time for reflection away from the busy, anxiety driven world. It's a place of reflection.
Yeah, that too. Sure.
Yeah, definitely.
It,
Um,
it's an effort to get you out of yourself and your own narrow self-interest too. I mean, sometimes you're praying for on a more regular prayer schedule. You would be praying for what God wants. helping you have God help you figure out or show you the right. Realize that you're imperfect and you're going to screw up. It's God's help. All of that, actually, it's very psychologically healthy. And that's something else I point. I know it sounds very modern, right? Because ancient Christian, we'd be talking about what we owe God, but no, we get rewards for these things. We tend to be more psychologically healthy. Realize God's in charge and we're not. And realize we can't control everything. We can't even control how others see us or understand. Our best in go around. Lie. You let go. You let God. You realize God's in charge. This is all very psychologically beneficial to the human being, even if you're like some kind of weird atheist and doesn't think this is true. No, the ability to let go. Say, I hope God's. That's God. I did my best, and that is as part of your constant daily. It's all very psychologically good for you.
Definitely. Um, Sorry, I have to tweak the audio a little bit, but yeah, and the other thing is the sort of Christian understanding is prayer is the work of the Christian, and that's what we do, and our participation in personal prayers or the forms of prayer in the church all tie together into a whole. And that's what worship is. That's what morning and evening prayer are. That's what even the divine liturgy or mass is prayer. And there are lots of aspects to it, but it's a orientation towards the fundamental ultimate reality of God, mediated by Christ for the Christian, and that active relationship with that.
Yeah, that reminds me of I don't know where, but I'd heard that Saint Thomas Aquinas kind of understanding of pray unceasingly was to not like literally always be like in prayer verbal, just because like you can't do that at all times when you're like just communicating with other people, but the understanding there I guess was to always attempt to enact God's will in everything that you do, like do everything for the glory of God in all of our actions and time and place.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm curious, is the like I know for in the kind of modern kind of secular understanding of prayer as well, okay, there's the psychological beneficial aspects of prayer, but I don't know, that seems very much a almost modernist understanding of it, as you're praying for the psychological effects that are resulting in it. It is that something that, I don't know, maybe we're thinking about it within the modern framework instead of the the original intention and function of prayer prior to this kind of culture of thinking about things psychologically speaking instead of the way they were previously?
Well, I think it's important to remember that in some sense we're built from prayer, and that things are beneficial to us when we use them appropriately, and that a key part of why we do prayer is in fact to form us into the types of beings that we want to be. And I think you're right that in some sense the emphasis on the mental health aspects of prayer is something that's more modern, but at the same time this was like the recommendation of people throughout the ages for how to benefit oneself mentally and so on and so forth. And I guess one of the key frustrations I have is in sort of the modern American world, they dismiss the Christian prayer and meditative practices, but there's a live option for like the Buddhist and Eastern ones. And the thing is the Christian ones are just as elaborate as the Eastern ones are. It's just that they've been sort of ignored in our modern tradition.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'd say is that about the Red Pill Religion Project, what it historically has been evolving, especially under Andrew's leadership. But the we're trying to get modern people to understand things, and I would agree with you completely because there's this idea that we wish real hard and we think that God, the wish fairy, will make our wishes come true, and that it's this primitive weird thing where you pretend the sky daddy is going to be doing things for you, and they literally think it looks insane. And you know, stereotypes in the media don't hurt. But no, ultimately you are right because it is about, our duty to God, our relationship with God. I believe prayers are answered. I believe I psych myself in those. I've had spiritual experiences which you could, if you want, write them off as psychological or deep and profound in a prayer. And so it's important for people to understand this is serious. But yeah, no, for if you're a serious Christian, especially, you should be. Um,
Right. Yeah, and I think Max, maybe your sensitivity in a Discord might be a little bit too high because it's almost like every fifth word or so is kind of cut out a little bit. So if you want to change that,
I will try switching machine.
okay. Yeah, yeah. Well, it might just be a setting in Discord but so okay, getting a better understanding then for prayer is it's you. I don't know. I know at least within kind of the evangelical kind of context that I'm sure a lot of people familiar with Christianity in America is that prayer is the like just like what Max was saying, the kind of wishing towards God and then expecting kind of him to fulfill that wish for us. At least that's kind of within the prosperity gospel movement. There's that idea of prayer, and I think that's kind of been, I don't know, it might just be that it's impressed itself into a lot of people that aren't as familiar with the cultural history or yeah, the Christian history of prayer and the understanding of it from church fathers' perspectives, things like that, just being Protestant and you kind of from that evangelical movement. But okay. So I wanted to bring up how, I guess, even for other religions that wouldn't have a like a deity in them, like, would you say that there is a Stoic prayer that is, and what is the purpose, I guess, of that then? Like, if there is one for, is that similarly as a psychological, I don't know, booster or help for the person praying the prayer there? Mm-hmm.
Set up correctly. Okay,
Well, I wonder if we shouldn't move to general voice. We're having the weird Discord thing where people are getting popped into general against their will.
I'll just move people here. There we go. So, basically, the key thing, I guess, is, I mean, Marcus Aurelius talks a lot about prayer and how to do it. And Dustin keeps on moving. Sorry.
Andrew, there's a known bug for this. It's going to keep happening. We're all going to have to move to general with him because he will not be able to stay in here. I'll explain it later.
Okay, well, let's move to general then. So as I was saying, yeah, I mean, it's not just a psychological boost, but how you're orienting your will. And the example Marcus Aurelius gives is, we ask the gods for, everything or for the best possible outcome. And if they say no, they must have their reasons, and the reasons must be better than ours because they're in charge, or they're divine. And I guess that's sort of the thing is the life of prayer for a Christian or the serious theist is all about the appropriate and proper relationship to have to God. And it's not only the reason why it's a psychological boost and psychologically rewarding is the same reason that doing something meaningful is a psychological boost and psychologically rewarding. It's the meaning that you get from being in the right spot in the right time and doing what you ought to do. And that's sort of what prayer is prayer is having that open discussion and open talk with God to figure out where you need to be and where you need to be oriented towards. And so there are psychological benefits to that, but there's this deep structure that it's helping with, that's where the psychological benefits come from. At least that's my perspective.
I see. Well, I guess then from my perspective, it's kind of hard to understand prayer, especially for the more fatalistic aspects of, say, Stoicism, or even in Calvinism, where if there's no, or I don't know, if certain deistic understandings of time, and it is, I don't know, I guess I don't understand it for how prayer would make a difference, or be a virtue within Stoicism if there is no, I guess, result that is attained through that act of prayer.
Yeah, well, and
I don't know. I'm not sure you're correct. There are any number of people, and the Stoics did have a concept of God. They really did. They were, there might have been Stoic atheists, but I don't think there were many, if there were any. And they had this idea there was a God, or there were the gods. There's actually a book you can find called A Book of Stoic Theology that explains what the Stoic religious thinkers thought. They did have a theology, not a super sophisticated one, but I've known other people like in AA and whatever, they pray to a generic idea of God. Now, from a Christian perspective, you can ask whether that's valid or not. I don't even want to get into the debate, but I mean, I've talked to people who pray to a generic idea of God, who will tell you that they've had prayers answered, and tell you that it's, I don't, from a theological perspective, you can decide whatever you want. I've even spoken to pagans who pray to their gods and claim to have gotten answers. And so at some point, I would agree that you have to get away from the modernist assumptions and thinking it's all about you. I will, I'll say straight up, I start with modern people, say, listen, there are psychologically healthy, tangible benefits to this. It's not primitive superstition. Now, but beyond that, no, there is a supernatural, there is a divine. It does matter. The supernatural is real. And prayers do get answered, and you can't expect a miracle, but they happen as a result of prayer, and lives are changed as a result of prayer. We do even have science. It's suppressed on the internet, but I can rustle it up for some people. We do have science in the sense of that tracks and observes miraculous occurrences. Well, we have evidence of that, really strong evidence, and of healing as a result of prayer and things like that. We do. They'll lie about it on Wikipedia, but and on the internet, but there's stuff available. There's the whole supernatural element to prayer, including the fact that God wants us to pray, and all that matters.
Well, and I'll just we'll talk about the Christian one in detail, but one of the points that the Stoics make is things are co-fated or connected together in the fates or in the chain of causality, and to claim that you're going to have children is fated, regardless of whether or not you have sex with a woman, is sort of silly, because the way that they understood it is things were co-fated together. That having something happen is actually co-fated with requesting that it happens, and that applies to stuff like prayer too. And of course, the more elaborate understanding that the Christians have is that God exists outside of time, but that doesn't mean that God doesn't answer prayers, and quite the opposite is that since God exists out of time and sees all of reality and all of history at once, he is able to more readily actually answer prayers and engage in this co-creation of history with us. And that's sort of the way that I look at it, is that it's not as though the prayer is ineffective, but prayer is actually how we participate in the creation of the world and the salvation of the world. And that's sort of my perspective, and it's sort of kind of maybe a bit mystical as opposed to analytical, but I think that's sort of the key to understanding this.
Yeah, a basic notion of co-creator, not in the sense, God is the only creator, but that God, through our prayers, through us asking for things in obedience to Him, uh, His plan comes through. His plan is ultimately fulfilled. Um, I think through God's middle knowledge, um, God will place us. This is what Dr. William Lane Craig goes over, and it's actually a Catholic theologian of the, I think, 16th or 17th century, Molina. God, through God's middle knowledge, um, He knows. He set up the world, knowing what you will pray, and so will have something come about. So if you were praying for someone to get well, it's not that God suddenly did something to make that person get well. It's from a timeless and changeless intention or middle knowledge, which isn't just foreknowledge, knowing beforehand, but knowing in all possible worlds what free creatures would do and what they would pray for. So God, knowing that you would pray for something, um, uh, predetermines that based on our free will for that to actually come about.
Hmm.
That's
That,
one way of looking at it. And yeah, no, I will attest that I mean, I have seen results from prayers, things that would not normally be explainable. And, the skeptic will like to always come up with some other explanation, no matter how cockamamie convoluted it is. But no, prayer works. Prayer has an effect. No, you
Well,
don't instant miracle every time you pray, but it happens. And
let me add,
miracles.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let me add one more thing. Craig Keener's book. He's a more of a Protestant theologian, um, um, evangelical, but he does go through this in his massive book on miracles, a 2 volume work, and documents these things. Many of these miracles being peer reviewed and doctors attesting to all over the world, praying in Jesus's name. And Craig Keener's maybe one of the top 2 biblical scholars in the world. So, for the skeptic who says miracles don't happen, you have to fly in the face of a lot of evidence today because they're just not looking for it. They're looking with tinted glasses. If y'all have ever heard that expression.
Yeah. If you go to a place like Lourdes, the church has officially only recognized maybe a few dozen authenticated fully. The church will stand by these healings in the last, few centuries, but they've documented a number and at Lourdes, and then on an annual basis they have doctors, including skeptical non-religious doctors, affirming all these weird healings that are occurring at places like Lourdes. At some point, the skeptic has to back his own BS up and prove that everybody's lying about these things. Or you can look at the Christian Scientists, and I know some Catholics are very anti-Christian Science, but they publish results of professional praying people who will pray for you for healings of various sorts, who are known to be very good at it and have very accurate abilities. And you only pay them if you agree that the praying for you worked. Now, there's other Christians who might condemn that or whatever, but they've been doing it for over a century and documenting successes for a long time in their own Christian Science journals. Again, I'm not saying go become a Christian Scientist, but I believe it's truly foolish of modern people to think nothing good ever came out of prayer. No, nonsense. And hey, listen, I'm going to go, guys. All the best to Andrew and the guys. I know you're going to do great without me running things. God bless everybody. I'll talk to you later.
God bless you.
Yeah, so I think that this is sort of the key thing, is that prayer as a practice actually does have real effects, and that it's a key part to the spiritual formation of Christians, and Thornton goes into this a lot in his books, Christian Proficiency in English Spirituality, especially from sort of the Anglican tradition. And prayer is a big part of our tradition, and as it is all Christians, but we have sort of a unique perspective because it's taken on by the laity primarily, as opposed to monks, as it is in Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really does benefit just from a health point of view. I believe, and I've read a number, 8 or 9 of Rodney Stark's books, and he goes into this. The book is right here. It's called the Triumph of Faith: Why the World is More Religious Than Ever. I think it was published in 2016 or 2017. Yeah, and it does go through that, how prayer is beneficial. So he also wrote another book. It is called America's Blessing: Why Religion Benefits Everyone, Including Atheists. So he goes through a lot of studies. Now, I'm not going to mention, all the other things that how religion benefits society, but prayer specifically, he goes over that, and there's just a lot of things. Even meditation, even for the hardline skeptic, and I also want to say this to my fellow brothers and sisters. We need to find a place of peace, away from a modern electronics, and a place where we can just speak to God. That happens a lot of times in the New Testament. Jesus going out to the wilderness and so forth. Fasting is also something we could talk about. But yeah, there's so many benefits of prayer.
Yeah, and maybe, I don't know, it seems like there's quite a few different practices that are all kind of being relayed into one singular word of prayer. And maybe it would be better, maybe if we can get a better understanding of like what is meant when we're referencing prayer. Like, are we referring to the kind of like, I want this thing to happen for me, and I'm going to pray for it to happen. And then if it doesn't happen, then that means that, I don't know, God wasn't there and wasn't listening. That's like, one interpretation that people take from the non-fulfillment of those types of prayers.
I want to answer that with, or at least try, just by saying what Jesus he prayed right before he was brought on charges and everything, and before his trial, he prayed that the cup, that it would pass, his arrest and everything, what he knew he was about to go through. But then he says, "Yeah, not as I will, but as thine will." He kind of asked for it, but he says, "I'm just going to trust in you." I think that is so humble. That is what I strive to be as I've grown. So prayer, there's a lot of crossover between asking for something and just communicating with God. Andrew or John.
Yeah, and that's the other aspect of prayer that is really, I guess, fascinated me, and I've been interested in actually trying to achieve it, or I don't know. There's somebody I know that had gone through like an extended period of fasting, and during that, and then continuing on even after the fast, carried on a almost dialogical relationship with God, and that is something that has been very hard for me to actually come to grips with and fully understand, or even like have any sort of framework for which to kind of keep this and understand it properly, because there are many different interpretations that I can take from that. One being that they went partially crazy, but from other interactions with them, they seem quite sober and still within their rational faculties, all of that.
Yeah. Are you saying are you talking about fasting, or they had some kind of experience while fasting?
Yeah, they went through an extended period of like over 40 days of fasting, just through water, and lost a lot of weight from that. And had and continues to have a almost conversational style of prayer, where they would ask questions, receive answers, carry sort of a dialogue. And he says that this is almost, it's not like always an audible type of voice. Sometimes it's almost like a put forward a thought, and then a thought comes forth. A thought comes forth in response from God, and yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can try to interpret that. Like you can see that as an element of schizophrenia, or maybe it's just a psychological image of God, or not. That's using kind of the wrong vernacular, but a model, I guess you could have, of God's character within him, and he's, I don't know, conversating with that model of his of God, or yeah, it's a hard thing that I haven't fully been able to understand or comprehend exactly, or it might even be the case that I've been avoiding trying to think about this, or try to put it into any type of understanding framework, because there's, I don't know, it's such a new shift for me that I don't know how to.
Well, first let me just say
that,
that anybody who's doing 40 days of fasting, that is a wow, that's that's just awesome. I don't think I could go 4 hours of fasting right now. Sometimes I need a Big Mac. Andrew,
he has a lot of commitment.
Yeah, and I guess that the key question is, what is this leading him? What is he perceiving when he thinks he hears the voice of God or senses that or what have you? And that's the thing is God does speak to us in a still small voice, and he very well could have dramatically developed his skill to listen over the past 40 days. But the question is, how well is he doing that, right? And has he been taught discernment of spirits and things like that? Because it's definitely logically possible that he is hearing God very clearly and being very discerning and having these conversational prayers. And unless there are some other evidence of mental detachment or delusions, I don't think that it's appropriate to call it schizophrenia, because just like you said, he for him, he's not experiencing it as an auditory voice all the time, only perhaps when God is yelling at him, so to speak.
Now, if he is having like new revelations and saying, well, the next prophet is going to arrive, something like that, then my suspicions would definitely creep up, because you're going against the Bible and church tradition. And there's a lot of things that that I would have, but I think in fasting, and a person is in prayer, if they are that attuned to God, and if they can fast that long and keep their cognitive faculties functioning properly, who's to say, as Andrew alluded to, that they're not grasping some type of signal from God, not a physical signal, but I mean, look at our hearing capacity and our seeing capacity. There are different types of wavelengths that are physical, that we don't that we can't even grasp with our senses. And how can we be skeptical that there's not more to reality? I'm often hear Shakespeare's Hamlet. There are more things, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Often think of that, but I would come to it with some skepticism, healthy skepticism, though. It'd have to be on a case by case basis. Anyone who's claiming to hear the voice of God, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and I totally understand that, and I think that he's self-aware enough as well to understand this as not something like end all be all. Like, this voice says something, and now this like changes everything, anything like that. Has to take into account where it's his, I guess, projection or his intrusion and receiving a voice that aligns with his own like intuitions or things like that, versus what is the stuff that kind of comes to him as almost a surprise and like something that he was not expecting and not really wanting to hear. And it seems like that's sort of a useful tool to keep in mind. Another thing that he's mentioned, like there's certain things that God's voice says to him that is within. It's almost like within his own vernacular. So he has certain phrases that he uses sometimes, and then like the voice will also use those types of phrases. And something that he's brought up is that perhaps God speaks to everyone according to the language that they are most capable of understanding within. And so it might be the case that his prayerful conversations with God are more to do with what he needs in that moment, rather than something that needs to be spread out to all the masses and shared for all of them.
that's a good point. It's something called accommodation. You know, God of infinite wisdom and intelligence and omniscience would accommodate his intelligence to our finite, error-prone language and forms of speech and forms of phrases and concepts as best we can. That's why I think God didn't teach Moses calculus or something like that. But anyway, that's just a little point I wanted to add.
It sounds like your friend has sort of the right perspective. I guess the key question is whether he seems to have become more holy and virtuous after his fasting or not.
Yeah, and I definitely do notice that aspect of his character change. That he's more like seeking unification rather than like having any sort of contentious battles between each other. Really trying to find out what his purpose and fulfilling that. Especially since I don't know, certain life changes for him that are going on might be another part that's bringing that question up for him.
I was just thinking about it. I don't know if you're familiar with someone, the mathematician Bill Dembski. He wrote a book called The Explanatory Filter of the Intelligent Design people. Right here, I'm not advocating that, but maybe if someone's perceiving God, are they improving on their life? Are they constantly looking at the Scripture? Are they in communion with the rest of the church? I think that there's a number of ways to see if a person has some kind of mental illness, or if he's in proper relationship to God. Something like a Christian theistic explanatory filter.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that's there as well. That he says, I don't know, like how many instances that he'll receive words from God, of like scriptural passages that he had did not realize were there, and then find out that yes, they were indeed there, or like meanings of words, like things like that. There are things similar to that, which is again, I don't for someone who has had a hard time understanding prayer for a lot of my upbringing. It's something that is still very much hard to understand, especially because of how many instances there are of people thinking that they have received the word of God through prayer, and then acted upon that, and then did horrible things, or were mistaken, that led them out of their faith.
The prosperity. You can have false hope. God wants you to be rich. Someone might go spend a lot, make a loan, not taking into account all the other things of what God wants us to do, or how to act. And I think he can do that, or he does that primarily, or does that the natural order in our bonds and in our church. That's my perspective.
And the other thing to keep in mind is these sorts of spiritual practices are sort of like lighting a lighthouse, and the good spiritual influences aren't the only things that will come to you when you're in a state of spiritual receptivity. There's lots of stuff in the Desert Fathers on this that is very useful. But one of the key things is basically that these thoughts that intrude into our minds oftentimes don't come from us. They come from spiritual things, and they could come from angels or God, but they can also come from from demons or evil spirits. And so just the fact that you have a thought enter your mind with no explanation doesn't necessarily mean it's from God. And I think that explains a lot of this stuff that we run into with people getting thoughts that are either incorrect or lead them away from the faith or to do horrible things. And the thing is, all the sort of surface level things of how it's phrased or what's it about can easily come from a demonic influence. There's a great story in the Desert Fathers about this monk who receives this angel of light that says, "You've been chosen to be a great prophet," or something like that. And he looks at the angel and says, "You must be mistaken. I'm not worthy of anything." And then he disappears, and it turns out it was a demon. And that's the thing, is that outward trappings can be mimicked by demonic forces or things. And so we need this discernment from tradition and scripture and even the living structure of the church to make sure that we're on the right page.
And I think that is such a powerful argument, Andrew, for not just as the desert to the we need to be in communion. We need to be in communion to a community of in a whole church, right? In a whole church, right? Whether you're it's me and you,
Right. Yeah, we need a community that we can test the things that we've been given, get a better grasp at whether or not this is from God or from ourselves or from other spirits out there.
Yeah,
and also checking with scriptural basis and also church fathers and
the great thing about the Holy Spirit.
But I think that's awesome.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
You first.
I was gonna say, just as something funny. I think that's a good art. Why we read the church fathers or books. We shouldn't just read books commenting on the church fathers, but actually read the church fathers, read older type of books. I used to tell my students not everything new is good. It's kind of like for a reason, an accumulation of knowledge and wisdom that got us here to today.
Yeah.
There's the classic quote from G.K. Chesterton that tradition is democracy of the dead. Tradition means giving a vote to the most obscure of all classes, our ancestors.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So we're about an hour through, so let's go ahead and have final thoughts from everyone, and then we'll do our closing prayer if that's a good fit for you.
Work? Yes.
Okay, Dunstan, go ahead and give your final thoughts.
I really enjoyed the discussion. There's a lot we did not cover. I hope we can do that in future podcasts. We're going to be doing this weekly. We're going to hopefully every week now and then. Hopefully a special occasion, some other occasions, for sure weekdays, but for sure we just it's really great to discuss with y'all. Not everybody knows everything. I really enjoyed thoroughly discussing with you two. You had such great insight into a lot of things. So thank you, both of you.
Thank you, Dunstan. For me at least, through this conversation and discussion, I feel like a better understanding of the better understanding of the personal aspects of prayer towards self of prayer towards or not self towards the or not change within the person the actually change praying within the person both to actually praying both put forward what they put forward what their request of God, but also request of putting God, forward it also in such a way that they will be in such a way that they able to accept the results, whether they are the results, whether they are whether or not the request is fulfilled, or if the request is not fulfilled, or if it is not. Yeah, and also the connection between and also the connection what we're receiving in prayer. What we're receiving and prayer, testing it both and in our lives and also against in our lives and also against all of our history that's there as well. History that's there as well, and other people's lives too.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess sort of the key thing is prayer is a very important human activity that everyone seems to need to engage in, and that we need to have the right technology and the right understanding and practices to support us with it. So with that, I'll go ahead and do our closing prayer, and we'll sign off of the live stream. Almighty God, the fountain of all wisdom, who knowest our necessities before we ask, and our ignorance in asking, we beseech Thee to have compassion upon our infirmities and all those things which for our unworthiness we dare not, and for our blindness we cannot ask. Vouchsafe to give us for the worthiness of Thy Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. God bless you all, and we will see you in about a week.
See you in about a week.